Welcome to this third module on case analysis and reporting. In this video, I will highlight 5 key case writing strategies or skills. These will be most relevant for students intending to write CPA Canada's Common Final Exam, and there is no time like the present to start incorporating these into your good habits for your personal case analysis and reporting approach. So the 5 key case writing strategies and skills that I want to present in this module include developing a big picture view of the situation so that you can get at the important issues. Now, we've talked a lot about this in the previous videos. In a financial accounting case, there's typically one main concern. This may be true in integrated cases, but frequently those may have 2 or 3 key issues, because in the common final exams, they are geared to testing 6 different technical competency areas, not just financial accounting, as well as 5 enabling competencies. The second skill is to learn to develop a one-page plan or outline on paper. You need to learn to do this quickly and effectively during your reading of the case, as there are no marks awarded for planning directly. Next, you need to be able to respond to each of the issues in appropriate quality and depth. The significance of responding in appropriate quality and depth is about distinguishing people who are ready to become professionals from those who are not. Now, a lot of what we do is manipulate information in an analytical way. A quantitative analysis schedule or exhibit is called a quant. If you're like me, you can spend a lot of time developing comprehensive quantitative exhibits, but since time is a scarce resource in an exam setting, you must apply judgment to determine the simplest quant to arrive at a decision that is unlikely to be different if you were using a more time-consuming analysis. And finally, in the second video, I explained what is required to communicate your PVA effectively. In this video, I will highlight some ways alluded to in the second video about how to be efficient in developing professional-looking reports. So going a bit more deeply into the first key skill, which is identifying the main concern or the key issues that are really important to the client. Some hints here are that the main concern is often indicated by the client's contemplation of a material transaction, like the purchase of another business, the sale of their business, the raising of financing, or possibly dealing with a cash flow problem. It becomes evident that this is important to the key stakeholder to accomplish, sometimes personally, especially if the key stakeholder is the controlling shareholder in a private business, or perhaps the CEO or CFO in a public company. Another indicator of a main concern in a case is that this issue may pose significant risk to the business entity. And that being the case, a lot of times business owners are focused on, returns and growth and profits, but risk is not something that can be overlooked. They could be challenges that stand in the way of achieving the goal that the shareholder or owner are focused on. All right, so important issues are those that impact the main concern. For example, if the main concern is about a material transaction related to, let's say, the sale of a business, then one of the important issues that will impact that is how the business is expected to be valued. Maybe the prospective purchaser and seller have agreed on some kind of a formula to determine a price. And this is an area that oftentimes buyers and sellers are not well informed about, but you as a professional might be. Important issues are also generally material, and I mean that either in the sense of monetary amount or the possible impact on risk. So when it comes to identifying important issues, one of the things that I've discovered is important to their determination is first of all taking stock of who the key stakeholders are, because only by knowing who the key stakeholders are can we really identify what the main concern is. So key stakeholders are people who matter in the context of the business case. They might be a business owner, they might be shareholders or a particular shareholder. It could be a lender. In some cases, it might be a regulatory authority like the Ontario Securities Commission or Canada Revenue Agency, but usually when we're dealing with financial accounting cases, that's not the situation. So a stakeholder also is someone who has a role in the case who could be materially impacted by the important issues. It's usually pretty evident when you're reading the case who the people who could be most impacted are. So those are the key stakeholders. Once we've identified who those people are, the next thing is to try to identify what their objectives are, okay? And these could be general or they could be specific. So we need to think about, from the facts of the case, what's important to them generally and what is specifically relevant to them based on the case facts. When I speak about generally, that refers to the objectives of a particular class of stakeholders. For example, investors are generally concerned with increases in an entity's valuation or stock price, while lenders are primarily concerned with getting their loan repaid in full in the ordinary course of business. And so those general objectives are pretty much true for any shareholder or any lender. The specifics of a particular case refers to using the case facts as they relate to both general and sometimes specific objectives of these stakeholders. Now, I can't tell you what the specific objectives might be. That just depends on the particular case you're analyzing. So we know who the stakeholders are. We know generally what they're trying to accomplish. The next thing we want to think about is, what do they need to accomplish these? They have to make some kind of decision, such as, closing a deal on the purchase and sale of a business or securing financing. So to make that decision, it's important to understand what criteria do the key stakeholders use in their decision-making process? How do they make such decisions? What do they base them on? What is their particular thinking model? For example, significant profitable growth is critical to achieving enterprise valuation that investors seek when they're trying to look for increases in the stock price. But generating adequate, sustainable operating cash flow is what's important to most lenders. Sometimes a case will leave you an innovative opening to think about how stakeholders should make their decisions and what criteria should be used. And we'll see this in one of our practice cases from the Beachy textbook. So this is a great opportunity to demonstrate professional judgment and professional value added. And I'll provide an example when we take up the case that I just referred to in a subsequent video. Lastly, if we understand what criteria the key stakeholders are going to use to make a decision, then we can use our technical knowledge and particular professional capabilities to help them obtain the relevant information that they don't have in order to support their decision making. And in doing that, we'll give consideration to how it should be analyzed and what professional advice we can render to support their decisions. The second key case writing strategy or skill that's important, particularly when we get into integrated cases in preparation to write the common final exam, is to get used to preparing a plan or an outline to approach the case. So this graphic on the slide is something that I've modified from suggestions made by Jason Fleming in his CFE case writing textbook. So it's my version of it. You can create your own version. I've come up with this version after considering probably 30 different cases and what was relevant in each case. This particular outline, as you can see from the major headings, timeline of events, organizational structure of various entities, identifying the key stakeholders and their objectives, and so on, there are 10 elements in this case plan. And you should be able to prepare a case plan in no more than 10 minutes as you go through and read the case. So you might start reading a case and sketch out some kind of a format with some headings, as I've suggested here, and then just try to populate this form as you go through and read the case the first time through. So you build it as you read it, all right? Now, when we look at cases in financial accounting, you might not need all of this information. However, you probably are going to need to extract from the case some quick highlights information in all of the shaded boxes, all of the colored boxes, all right? Now, the time budget at the bottom is relevant if you're going to write a case in an exam situation where you're truly constrained by the exam time limit. But if you're going to be doing some practice cases, I personally don't stress the time budget in the beginning, because my approach to this is first learn to do it right, then learn to do it fast, okay? All right, so when we deal with the key stakeholders, as we've just discussed in the previous slides, we're really talking about who are they, why are they important in this case, how do they think, how are they all connected to whatever the main issue is in this case. And of course, that's what I'm really trying to identify here is what is their main concern, and I've set up really a separate box for that. I haven't called it main concern in this template. I've called it the big picture issue. All right. Other factors to include in your plan are identifying specifically the important issues, which you would do in kind of the orange shaded boxes. And of course, this is designed for an integrated case in which you might have actually 4 main issues. They could be in different topics. If you want to use this format in our financial accounting course, then the 4 issues are likely going to be related to financial accounting, reporting, disclosure, presentation, and measurement. The issues each need to be ranked in terms of importance, and the importance is effectively the potential impact that you perceive in the beginning on the main concern. And the reason for ranking them in order of importance is it will ultimately impact how you allocate your time budget. You want to allocate the most time to the issue that's most likely going to have the most significant impact on the main concern. All right. So one of the other things we can do is create our initial impression of the type of quantitative analysis that's essential to do to be able for us to come to a conclusion and then recommend an appropriate course of action for each of these issues that we've identified. When you're in an exam situation, or even if you're working in a group setting and you've gotten together to analyze a case and you set yourself a time goal to say, look, we're not going to spend more than 3 or 4 hours on this, then allocate your time accordingly. This is a good practice to get into because you will eventually need it when you're required to analyze a case in an exam setting. And of course, it's critical once you've done this planning exercise and allocated time to analyze each issue, you must stick to your budget. You're going to have to develop good self-management practices in order to be effective in performing case analysis and reporting on an exam. And one of the main reasons for that is if you've spent the time rank ordering the issues, identifying which one is most important to the big picture, then you're going to spend proportionally a bit more time on those issues. Now, if you don't stick to your budget, then one of the things that may happen is that you run out of time and have no time left to analyze, say, the 3rd or the 4th issue. And that could be a critical shortcoming in being able to pass your case exam. So use this or something similar on every case in this course. And subsequently, you can do a post hoc analysis of the usefulness of your plan or the effectiveness of your plan when you're going through the debriefing process, which we'll talk about in the next video. In The third skill, okay, is about response quality and depth. And this is really where you have the best opportunity to demonstrate your capability for providing professional value added to your client. The first point I want to make about this is you need to be sure that you answer what the key stakeholder wants. And whether the key stakeholder is a client in the situation, whether it's your supervisor, perhaps you are the controller in an organization and you're reporting to a CFO, whatever they want, whatever you consider that they need or want is what you have to address in sufficient quality and depth. So the way to do that is, as I mentioned in the planning section, focus on the most important issues. They should receive more depth and consequently more time. These are the issues that the key stakeholders perceive as valuable, okay? And how do you think the key stakeholder might react if you did not address these with appropriate quality and depth? Thirdly, it's important to provide useful and trustworthy, technically accurate conclusions and recommendations, which are based on your competent analysis of case facts in combination with your technical knowledge. So we typically do this through quantitative or qualitative analysis, where we specifically include the consideration of alternatives. So considering alternatives is basically good management decision making, and it is a factor when you're evaluated on the quality and depth of your response. Likewise, you are explicitly evaluated on response quality and depth by paying particular attention to the application of technical knowledge to your case facts. And then the fourth element here is that when you're evaluated on response quality and depth, you're being assessed on your ability to demonstrate professional judgment. This means you have to factor in what's best for the particular key stakeholder. So that suggests you need to be sensitive to their needs, their financial condition, their motivations, and their objectives. Okay? So professional cases test more than just technical knowledge. Rather, they demonstrate your judgment in how to apply the technical knowledge to add value by providing specifically useful advice, or what I call PVA. Now, a few other points I want to make for your benefit about what constitutes response quality and depth. And I've prepared this checklist of 5 attributes. First of all, use case facts and avoid generalizing. The case facts are there for a reason. It's what makes the case unique and not like any other case. So you're being challenged to apply your technical knowledge to this particular set of facts, and the outcomes might be particularly different from a similar case, which had different facts. The next point is you demonstrate your technical knowledge with an appropriate type and depth of analysis. So here we're trying to balance sufficiency and efficiency. Sufficiency is kind of related to effectiveness. It's, how much analysis do I need to get to get to a decision, a supportable conclusion, that a more detailed analysis is unlikely to change. One example I can give you to kind of drive this point home, we might be trying to make a decision as, let's say, part of the accounting department in the management team about making a certain type of capital expenditure. And as you know, there are different types of analysis that you could conduct to choose between 2 alternatives. For example, you could do a simple payback analysis, or you could use a discounted cash flow. Now, the latter is going to be more complex and take more time. The former is very simple. What makes you decide to use the simple versus the complex is if you think both will get you to the same decision, then use the simpler, more efficient one to save time. you generally won't lose any marks unless you've been specifically directed to do a discounted cash flow analysis, which often happens, okay? But the choice of using the simpler one in an exam setting like CPA Canada's Common Final Exam, it actually reveals to the examiners another attribute they're testing you on, which is your ability to self-manage and get to relevant conclusions and recommendations within the time resources that are available to you. So you're not necessarily, at least in an exam situation, you're not necessarily going to detract from your professionalism by choosing the simpler approach. However, if a financial accounting case is asking you to, let's say, come up with a valuation of a financial instrument, then you probably cannot escape the use of discounted cash flow analysis. All right, the third point in the checklist is that you demonstrate judgment by considering alternatives. Please do not jump to the first conclusion that comes to mind. That's not a basis for good management decision making. Fourthly, we need to answer the question, so what? You know, you've done your analysis, so what? Well, the point I'm trying to make here is you need to draw a supportable conclusion from your analysis based on the case facts. This may be dependent on your role, and you'll just need to explain why that is and whether there might be even an alternative to consider. And lastly, addressing the question, now what, really extends our analytical conclusion to presenting a recommendation, which is a basis for credible, actionable advice, okay? So this kind of conclusion and recommendation, I just want to remind you, this is what clients are affected. So while it's important to keep the quant simple, the other thing that's kind of in conflict is we need to assure ourselves that there's adequate quality in the quant. And my strongest recommendation for ensuring the quality is to use the acronym PACER, which stands for Purpose, Analysis, Conclusion, Impact, and Recommendation. And I'm recommending that you ensure that each quantitative exhibit you prepare explicitly addresses these. So when you're preparing a quantitative exhibit, the first thing to remember is that every one should be labeled. It needs to be labeled so you can refer to it in your text analysis. And if you're not going to refer to it in your text analysis, then you probably shouldn't be doing an exhibit in the first place. So every exhibit needs to be labeled, such as Exhibit Q or Table N, for referencing from within your report. Now, this general format that I call PACER, okay, it starts with the purpose. And you should state the purpose of the quantitative exhibit right in the exhibit. If you're doing your analysis in Excel, then the first line should state the purpose of the quantitative analysis. And if you don't know what that purpose is, you probably shouldn't be doing it, okay? The second thing is actually to develop an analysis that's appropriate for the purpose. There should be a logical flow. You should show the steps of all of your work. It should be easy to read, logically flowing and consistent. Usually in a quantitative exhibit, you're going to be using columns to represent time and rows to represent various financial items. You can probably picture this right now for a discounted cash flow analysis for valuing long-term financial instruments. The C in PACER stands for conclusion, and you've heard me mention this many times in these videos. State your conclusion explicitly, right in the quantitative analysis underneath the analysis part. This helps to kind of check the box by the examiners that you've made a conclusion consistent with your analysis. So those first 3 points are essentially dealing with the what question, okay? Now, after we've stated the conclusion, we're now going to deal with the so what question, which is either in the quantitative analysis right under the conclusion statement or in the text in your report. You want to extend your conclusions to implications and consequences by adding some sense of impact. You know, why is this important? What is the implication for the client's business? How does it affect their cash flow or the availability of financing or their access to additional equity, things of that nature, okay? Finally, we're going to address the now what question by adding your actionable recommendations. Now that you've assessed the implication and you can determine the impact on the client's business, what are we going to do about it? And this is where the client is paying you to be told precisely what to do. So I will provide you with an example of a quality quant in a subsequent video when we, which I'll prepare for taking up one of the cases we will do in this course. All right, the last skill is about efficiently communicating your professional value added. So I've summarized these guidelines and tips for writing professional quality case reports into 3 categories: organization, creating a structure, and the particular content and composition and style. So if you want to reflect on how I've recommended you organize a professional report, go back and look at step 4.3 in the second video. All right. To create your report structure, I recommend building a skeleton report, which should be based on your case plan and budget, where you've identified the key issues. So you can create headings and for each issue and supporting subheadings using Word's styles feature. Headings are used for the key issues, which you should insert in order of importance in terms of their impact on the main concern. Subheadings can be used for alternatives within the headings, or I often use a standard set of subheadings for the analysis of each issue, which includes the nature of the issue or problem, analysis, a conclusion statement, an impact statement, and a recommendation. And if you get used to using that same set of headings, you'll see that if you use it consistently, issue to issue to issue, you'll be getting checks in all the necessary evaluative boxes. All right, after we've got our headings, we can then build a table of contents automatically within Word using Word's styles features for headings. So at this point now, we've kind of got a skeleton built. We can go ahead and document our analysis as we go, always remembering to include conclusions and recommendations, which of course might have their separate subheadings under each issue's heading. We'll include exhibits, prepare your quants in Excel, prepare comparative tables in Word, label everyone for reference, and then you can decide whether you want to collate all of your exhibits in appendices or whether you want to place them in the body of your report so that they appear kind of in context to the qualitative analysis that you're writing about. And then once you've analyzed all of the issues and you've got conclusions and recommendations following your analytical exhibits, then you can copy and paste your conclusions and recommendations into your executive summary for quickly assembling an executive summary. All right, a few points on content, composition, and style. Firstly, always have spell check and grammar check on. Submitting a report with spelling errors or grammar errors really detracts from your professionalism. You want to express a single thought in each sentence or using each bullet. And yes, bullets are quite acceptable when you're writing these reports, okay? So avoid lengthy, rambling, aimless text. That generally tends to indicate either you don't know your stuff or you can't communicate. I find tables are an excellent tool for comparative analyses like costs versus benefits, or also for summarizing points. Graphs are useful if you want to create impactful visuals. Now, graphs do take time to produce. However, in Excel, you can produce a graph in probably 5 seconds if you've set up your analysis properly. And there may be some minor issues You know, you've identified the key issues in your case plan. There may be a few minor issues. Here you want to address these very briefly, but only if there's time. And remember, every issue needs to have a conclusion or recommendation, and conclusions or recommendations need supporting analysis of alternatives, so they can be time consuming, which is why you only address minor issues briefly. Now, this is an example of a comparative table that you might be able to include in an executive summary. So you could assemble this very quickly. You can either do it in Word or you can do it in Excel. I recommend Word because if you've got conclusions and recommendations in each of your issue analysis sections, this is a simple matter of copying and pasting them into a table right at the front of your report so that your client can see immediately all of the work you've done and the benefit that you've rendered. Tables are a powerful and efficient means of communicating comparisons, either for analysis of alternatives or for summarizing. What you can see from this table, if it was placed in an executive summary, is that it clearly communicates to your client the issues they asked you to consider, the conclusions that you derive from your analysis, the impact or implications for their business, and the recommendations about what they should do, all neatly in one place. Impressive. And it supports a client's perceptions of your professionalism and credibility. This slide presents you with a summary of the entire process and factors to consider in analyzing and reporting on a financial accounting case. I encourage you to use this process for all your undergraduate cases. Each of these steps lists the particular set of sub-steps. So in evaluating the big picture, for example, we've got 3 issues, and in communicating, I've highlighted 4 issues. These are all supported in different slides in videos 2 and 3 in this series. Get as much practice as you can using this approach, and I'm confident you'll improve your own competence and confidence in case analysis and reporting. Feel free to take a screenshot of this slide as long as you include the copyright in the footer. Here is a credit for the image used in this presentation section. In this presentation section and video, I've identified and provided insights into 5 key case writing skills and strategies that are essential to passing professional CPA exams and for financial accounting, case analysis, and report writing. Thank you for watching, and be sure to check out the 4th and final brief video module on debriefing your case analysis and reports.